Hey, everybody. Welcome to this very special Daily Dispatch. I'm Julie Roginski here with my friend Nina Jankowicz. Nina, I am so glad to have you here because this is like the best time to talk to you. For people who don't know, Nina has had many hats, but one of the more prominent ones among them is that she led the Disinformation Board. I don't know if that was the official name, but for the Biden administration for a short period of time until the disinformation got to her. And we could talk more about how that all began and how it continued, and my suspicions, and probably you can validate this for me about where it began and how it proceeded. But in the meantime, it's so good to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Always great to be on your show, and congrats on all the massive success of your new network and all the success on Substack.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, people here are watching us on Substack and on YouTube. So welcome to everybody who's here tonight. So Nina, I want to talk to you about this new project that you're launching, and we can go into other stuff later, but you're launching something that I think is so sorely needed. And it is called TrumpCensorship.com. And you are documenting all the different ways that Donald Trump is censoring real news, right? And things that we're all trying to talk about. So tell me why this began, what the impetus was, what's going on, fill people in.
Absolutely. So about a year ago, with my nonprofit, the American Sunlight Project, we started documenting every week instances of the Trump administration censoring the American people. Everything from retaliating against perceived critics to attempting to muzzle the press to changing and policing wording that the federal government was using. And we found this really ironic because in our work in countering disinformation, we all have been attacked by the Trump administration for alleged censorship. And when President Trump came into office, he signed an executive order on his very first day of office saying, we are going to protect free speech. We're going to restore free speech in America, he said. And now, I don't know about you, but I didn't know that free speech had been attacked in America.
Well, it's a Christmas, right? We'd all say Merry Christmas now that Trump is back. We weren't allowed to say that before, but I guess much like Christmas, free speech is back. But go ahead.
Exactly. And the irony, of course, is that even in his first couple of weeks of office, Trump was doing more censoring than we had seen since the McCarthy era in the United States. And as these incidents piled up, we started to have this very long and unwieldy post on Substack that we were updating every week. And we were like, what if we visualize this for people? Because I don't think they realize that this is actually over 200. I think now we're over 220 incidents of censorship over the past year. It means that every week, several things are happening that rise to the level of your freedom of expression, your freedom of speech, your freedom of assembly being affected by this administration. And yet people like me and my colleagues who have researched disinformation and tried to make, social media platforms safer places for everyone to raise their voice, to use their speech rights, have been attacked as censors. So we want to point out the irony there, but also, Julie, one of the sad things about this administration is that they're trying as hard as they can, not only to rewrite history as it's happening, but to erase what's already there. And we want to make a record of that. And that's what this website does.
So give a few examples, I guess the most egregious examples of what they've censored, because I think most people, when they think about Trump censoring things, think about, like, I'll use an example, the 60 Minutes incident, where effectively they don't like something. So they use Barry Weiss or other people to effectively try to kill something they don't like. But I suspect there's probably much more egregious examples even than that, even though that was pretty outrageous. So
Absolutely. Yeah. So when I was going through the data to make sure that it was all spiffed up before we launched this website, one of the things that I had honestly forgotten about is the way that the Trump administration has removed texts, books that it thought were either too pro-DEI or pro-diversity from military libraries, including the Naval War College and at Annapolis, I believe. That was one of the more shocking ones. Obviously, there are silly things that happen too, like they've basically just done a Control F for the word gay on the Department of Defense website and taken down pages related to the Enola Gay, the plane that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. I mean, silly things like that. But then you look at stuff like what happened to Jimmy Kimmel and down the line. I mean, it's not just people like Kimmel, it's people who are much smaller, who have much less name recognition, that are the Trump administration is attempting to cow into submission. And they're, in many cases, thank goodness, saying no. But what really worries me is, we've got these 220 plus incidents. that we know of. What if the incidents where people have said, all right, you know what, I'm not going to risk life and limb, I'm not going to risk my job, I'm not going to put my family in danger, I am just going to go along with this? Because you and I both know from our experience in Russia and the rest of the post-Soviet space that, that sort of pressure does get to people, and understandably so, right? Not everybody has the mettle to stand up to a powerful man like Donald Trump or his allies.
Yeah, I guess when you're talking about this, what makes me think about are all the people who after Charlie Kirk died,
yes,
were fired or otherwise pressured, right? Because they said something that wasn't even like particularly awful in saying that Charlie Kirk should have died or anything along those lines, even though they should have had the freedom to say that, even if they, even if people didn't agree with it. But something even, I don't know, something even more generic than that, like, oh, well, you're against the Second Amendment, you're for the Second Amendment, like live by the sword, die by the sword, things like that, which, not an unreasonable belief. Charlie Kirk himself said it, right?
Yeah.
There's some that some lives should be sacrificed to preserve the Second Amendment, and that was a trade-off that he was willing to accept.
Yeah.
But when you kind of parrot those talking points back, that suddenly became unacceptable, and people literally lost their lives. I mean, not lives, excuse me, their jobs and livelihoods, I meant to say. And you have people like J.D. Vance and others who were trolling the internet looking to embarrass people and get them fired. And so,
indeed, even making lists about that stuff. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has made lists, including lists of journalists and media outlets that do what they perceive as, fake news coverage. It's not actually, let me rephrase that, because I don't even think they perceive it as fake news or as, media bias. It's just inconvenient coverage for them. And so they've put them on a list, which, can also lead to that sort of harassment and abuse. One other thing that you reminded me of while you were talking about the Kirk incident is, for years and years during the Biden administration, the conservatives and Trump allies went on and on about social media censorship and collusion between the administration and between the Democrats. Well, do you want to know one of the things that the Trump administration did that's just in that very same bone? They asked Apple and Google to remove the Ice Watch app from the app stores, and they did it. I mean, that is straight up job owning and censorship of the likes that they accused the Biden administration of, and got a Supreme Court case thrown out over because there was a lack of evidence for it. So it's just the classic, like every accusation is an admission of guilt. I mean, that's where we're
talking about that today on the morning show. Michelle, Kenny, and I, who do a morning show here at the Media Network every morning, talking about how literally every accusation is an admission. And it's so interesting to talk to you of all people about this, because you were pilloried and investigated and persecuted and almost prosecuted.
Yeah. Who knows? It could still happen. It could still happen.
I guess. Yeah. I guess the statute of limitations never expires with these people, even if it expires, in real life. But for doing nothing more than basically suggesting that community notes on Twitter might be a good idea.
Yeah. Well, right? I criticized community notes, but people took a quote totally out of context and said I wanted to edit people's tweets. It was bananas. I mean, so I had been brought in by the Biden administration to lead a coordination group within DHS that was going to set policy for DHS about how it responded to disinformation in the Homeland Security nexus. So that might be everything from disinformation about natural disasters. FEMA deals with a lot of disinformation, to disinformation about the border, to disinformation about elections, which the government considers critical infrastructure. And that's part of our cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency. Let me tell you, when I was in there for all of 11 weeks, DHS is a Frankenstein of an agency, of a bureau, of a department, with people with so many different understandings of government and their mission sets, and they needed a little bit of harmonization, and that's what I was brought up to do. But the way, unfortunately, the board was announced was I had some qualms with it, and the Republicans just took what was kind of a vague announcement and went apeshit with it, basically, and made up all sorts of things. And I've just been going through them as I work on a new project that I can't quite talk about yet, but I will be able to soon. Going through all the things that they said about me, and they were just, they had no bearing on reality. And what ended up happening was that Fox News and many other conservative networks, but primarily Fox, would have my image on the screen and say, Tucker Carlson, to say she has the power to send men with guns to the homes of Americans with whom you disagree, or with whom she disagrees, basically implying that I was going to send people out, much like this administration is doing right now.
Again, every accusation is an admission, because guess who's sending men with guns to people's homes right now? But
and of course, I was not an official who had that power. I had no budget. I had no staff. I was not sitting in a room looking at the internet postings of millions of Americans. I was trying to herd government cats. And as a result, because the Biden administration was really bad at comms, and the Republicans just kept slamming on this point every day, and there was no real response from the Democratic establishment, we got a ton of death threats. Our security has been forever changed. I was pregnant at the time and was dealing with trying to get to my prenatal appointments in literal disguises, because I was on TV that often and was a sitting duck. I mean, I was 9 months pregnant. And so I ended up resigning. And since then, we've seen the entire US counter disinformation establishment collapse like dominoes over the past 4 years. Part of that during the Trump administration, the last vestiges, but part of that was a total own goal by the Biden administration that was just this is too hard. We're not going to do it. It has nothing to do with any of the problems that we're facing right now. Yeah. And honestly, I think about the work that when I started doing this work on counter disinformation, I came into it because I was a Russia person, right? I saw what Russia was doing in Central and Eastern Europe, in countries like Ukraine and Estonia and Poland. And I was they're definitely doing it here too. We need to get up our defenses. And for a brief moment, we did have them. But now, Vladimir Putin is out there celebrating the fact that we are so divided, and that, I mean, among other things, that these defenses that were never good enough to begin with, but at least they were something, they now don't exist anymore. All those people, practically all of them, have been fired from the US government, and we have no institutional memory protecting us from Russia, from China, from Iran, from North Korean disinformation. And now you throw AI into the mix and a willing president who's happy to glad hand with Putin and other war criminals. And, it's a pretty bleak picture.
Well, it's interesting how it begins, right? I'm sure it began with you in the same way. You see something on Russia Today or any of these other Sputnik or any of these other Russian outlets, which we know, I mean, the definition of Russian propaganda. And then it seeps into where? Gateway Pundit, Breitbart, right?
With me, it was Jack Posobiec.
Jack Posobiec, another one.
Yeah. And then it, percolates from there.
Yeah, and then goes to Fox. And then, of course, once Fox covers it, eventually ends up, it's CNN being both sides to death. And then next thing you know, you're hiding behind a barricade while you're 9 months pregnant because people are trying to, come and kill you at your house. I mean, it's just truly amazing how, as you said, every accusation is an admission.
Yeah.
Every single one. And the attempt to counter Russian disinformation, which of course existed, and Olga Latman and I did literally a 20-part series on how Russia took over the 2016 election. But, the ability to be able to do that, and this administration not just not opposing it, which is bad enough, but actually actively encouraging it because it benefits them. And the chaos benefits them. I mean, Russia's not, Russia's a chaos agent, so it just wants massive chaos. But the chaos benefits Trump, right? Stability doesn't benefit Trump. And so it's just incredible how that happens, and how the ability to want to fight that was not supported by the Biden administration. Look, I'll say this as a supporter of Joe Biden. What happened there was a huge and utter failure.
Yeah.
In a series of many failures that could have precluded a lot of what happened next. And I don't understand if they weren't, I mean, you tell me, because you worked at DHS, were they just not aware? Were they just not focused? It is so obvious to those of us who are not in government watching what was going on. What was going on there?
I mean, I was told a lot of times that, it would blow over by the weekend. So the announcement went out on a Wednesday. It got worse and worse. By Thursday, Tucker and Hannity and Laura Ingraham had all done a segment focused on me, right? And when they're focused on you, is bad. It gets bad quickly. And they know that. And, I kind of sent up a couple of flares to DHS, and I was like, what are we going to do? That weekend, they sent the secretary out on Sunday shows. But that in and of itself, I told them this at the time, and was pushing for more kind of deliberate engagement and certainly quicker engagement. the audience we needed to reach wasn't watching the Sunday shows, right? They were, shit posters online. And if we didn't fill the vacuum with information that seemed trustworthy at all, and of course, DHS, no matter what administration, is operating at a trust deficit, then it was going to be filled for us. And in that case, the vacuum was being filled with conspiracy theories about me. I mean, my tweets and performances, I used to do theater from years before, were being picked apart online as if they were, my qualifications for the job. And my kind of, I only had a small window into the administration, but it seemed to me like they really operated as if the internet was a snow globe that they could look at from time to time, rather than an integral part of communicating, of governing, of understanding, of building trust. And it was there, but it wasn't something that they really relied on for any of those things. And I think that was the fatal error. And then frankly, just not being quick enough. Like, moving at the speed of government is not okay when you're dealing with the other side, which moves at the speed of troll. And that's what we're seeing with the Trump administration too, right?
Was it just an antiquated, because I struggle with Democrats about this all the time. Like, were they just completely misunderstanding? And I think Democrats to this day still misunderstand how media works these days. Like, was there just an antiquated viewpoint of the fact that the Sunday talk shows are not the thing anymore? Nobody watches them. Nobody cares. The evening news is not necessarily something anybody watches anymore. Even cable news is not anything anybody watches anymore. Like, all the actions taking place here.
Yeah, well, and
they didn't grasp that, or did they get it? And just
no, they didn't get it. I mean, I don't think they got it. I'm sure there were individual people who did, but the way that they announced the board belied their entire understanding of, or misunderstanding of, the internet. I would say it was in a blurb in Politico Playbook, like with an issue that is so misunderstood and so politicized as disinformation. Like, you needed to have more than just a 4-sentence vague blurb in something for Washington insiders. You needed to be reaching out behind that, beyond that. And in initial kind of planning for the announcement, I was like, okay, we need to have people across different industries who can understand what we're doing, who can maybe vouch for it as sort of third-party validators. And none of that happened. And then, there was because of the focus on me, there was a lot of interest in me. And I kept saying to people around the department, I'll march my pregnant butt up to Capitol Hill and talk to Josh Hawley. I'll go on TV. Like, I think I cut a very compelling figure. And instead, they allowed me to be, created into this cartoon villain. And in some ways, I'm still working hard to repair that image. I used to get called up to Capitol Hill by folks like Chuck Grassley to give testimony, and now they won't meet with me and they think I'm a crazy person.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think everything's become such a team sport right now that you could be the most qualified human being on earth, and they know that you're the most qualified person on earth, and they still don't want to hear from you because obviously everything's we're all wearing different jerseys. But I want to talk to you also, and it's relevant because you were quoted in the New York Times, is it today, about Ilhan Omar, about the attack
last night.
The attack on Ilhan Omar that took place a couple of days ago. I think it was on Tuesday night that took place in Minneapolis at one of the town halls. She doesn't have to be your cup of tea for you to appreciate what we're about to say. But the attacks on her are deeply racist, deeply Islamophobic, and of course, deeply gendered.
Yeah.
And, the attacks on you, I wonder, would they have been the way they were if you weren't a woman? I don't think so.
No. I don't think so at all. And the irony of all this, which, many pundits from, Terry Gross to Brian Stelter have pointed out, is that I study disinformation and gendered attacks, and then became the online abuse as well, and became the subject of all three. I mean, with Omar, it was interesting. And the reason I think that the Times called me up, because back in 2020, my team at the Wilson Center, when I was studying disinformation there, may it rest in peace, the Wilson Center still nominally exists, but has basically been dismantled by the Trump administration, because who needs nonpartisan policy analysis these days? We did a paper on gendered disinformation, and we looked at some of the biggest names on both sides of the aisle in the 2020 election, including AOC and Ilhan Omar. And even at the time, the attacks on Omar, I mean, they were they were bananas. This was right after Laura Loomer had done her like crazy sting operation saying that Ilhan Omar had married her brother, which again, it just ticks all the boxes there. It's racist, it's Islamophobic and gendered.
Right.
And those rumors, those lies to this day are the sorts of lies that plague her and also fuel so much of the disinformation that brought this whole shitstorm to Minneapolis to begin with, right? The whole thing about the daycare, sure, there was some daycare fraud, but like the individuals like Nick Shirley and others who have uncovered it. I mean, other local outlets have been covering stuff like this for years and years, and it's all about this deep-seated racism related to the Somali community. But we looked at that gendered disinformation and saw that particularly for women of color who were serving in public office, you were more likely to receive more and more vitriolic abuse if you were a woman of color that compared to your white counterparts. And of course, now, you know, the threat is so much bigger as we enter into a world where political violence is just becoming normalized. I mean, I could believe it, but it was still shocking to me the speed with which Trump said, "Oh, she probably did the attack herself, like it was an inside job."
Oh, I mean, again, every accusation's an admission, because God forbid anybody said something like that about Butler, Pennsylvania. You would have been pilloried.
And people were.
Right?
Yeah.
People lost their jobs. Like, you could not even imply that Butler, Pennsylvania was anything other than a, you know, divinely averted assassination attempt.
Yeah.
And now it's like, well, of course she set this up herself. Like, of course. And now, of course, everybody in Trump world is following along.
Yeah, well, I thought it was interesting as well that I just saw this before we came live. The district attorney in Hennepin County has charged that man at the state level because and she said this outright, they no longer trust the federal government to carry out a fair prosecution and for the president not to pardon him. So they're charging him at the state level. Like, this is a breakdown of law and order that is really worrisome. But, you know, coming back to Omar, I just think look at the violence that we've seen in the past year. The state lawmakers in Minnesota, right? The Melissa Hortman and her husband and her poor dog, Charlie Kirk, this attack on Omar. I mean, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some instances as well. It's becoming shockingly normal, and particularly for women who are serving in public life to be attacked in this way. When you look at where we've come since Gabby Giffords, I mean, I remember exactly where I was and how I felt when the Gabby Giffords shooting happened. This was at a time when I was like entertaining. One day I would serve in political office, and those days are gone. But you know, I was shocked that could happen in America, and now it's just commonplace. It's commonplace.
It's like Columbine. You know, I'm old enough to remember when Columbine happened in 1999, and we were shocked. I mean, like, shocking is not the word. This was news for weeks and months on end, and now there's a shooting and we barely know about it. I mean, it's you know, everything gets normalized to such an extent that people are just living on a knife's edge right now and understand that that's how we're going to live. I mean, there's a I feel like a low level stress that's constantly underneath the surface. And by the way, I don't think that's necessarily just Democrats who hate Trump. I think that's the entire nation. I think MAGA is that way too. They're just stressed out about different things. But I mean, it's become just a much more insecure country. And I don't mean insecure from a foreign attack perspective, although you tell me, having worked at DHS, that's probably the case too, but insecure from a literal people not feeling secure in themselves and in their livelihoods and in their safety and in their day-to-day activities. I mean, when you have to think about sending your kids to school and worrying about whether they're going to get gunned down, I never had to worry about that growing up. I bet you didn't either. You're a little younger than me, but you know, you actually were in school during Columbine. But I mean, like, the reality is this is nothing that those of us who are Generation X or older had to worry about. Millennials did, because that's the Columbine generation, and certainly Gen Z do. But, you know, I wanted to ask you, speaking of DHS, about DHS, because you worked there. DHS was, of course, famously created after 9/11. We've gone a very long way from Tom Ridge, the first secretary, to, you know, to what it is right now. But, you know, or is that DNI? I'm thinking about Tom Ridge. But anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, like, what are we thinking about DHS? Does it need to
Does it need to
Well,
exist?
yeah. Like what's up with DHS?
Yeah. So it's I think it was the intent is that, you know, there were intelligence sharing lapses that led to 9/11, and many of them were with these smaller bureaus and agencies that dealt with intelligence related to the homeland, which is a phrase I'm still not. It just reminds me too much of Rodina in Russian, like the fatherland, the motherland, right?
Right, right, right.
And I'm not good at saying that phrase, but yes, intelligence related to the homeland. So you have everything from Customs and Border Protection to the Transportation Security Administration to the infrastructure and cyber folks that we talked about before, and FEMA, and the Secret Service is also part of DHS, right? And it really does feel like a Frankenstein. I mean, I say that all the time, but when I would, from my seat at policy headquarters, try to get people from all these different agencies and bureaus to speak to one another, many of them had never met before. Many of them really didn't understand what their colleagues in different bureaus were doing. They were literally physically seated in different buildings around Washington because DHS headquarters, little known fact, well, known to some, but certainly not known to the general public, is in a former insane asylum, um, which is just a little too on the nose.
Yep.
And then all of the other bureaus are just scattered around DC and sometimes even in Virginia. And there just really isn't, you know, I don't think it's meeting the goal of being a coordinating factor in the work that it's supposed to be doing. And then you add in a rogue agency like ICE that is well known among federal employees as attracting, I don't think I'm out of line in saying this because it's other people's words, not mine, but attracting people who like couldn't get into policing, and so they've gone to ICE. And that was
like corrections, right? It's like people corrections, right?
Right. And it's pre-Trump. And now they're offering $50,000 bonuses to people who sign on, anybody who, you know, has a heartbeat. It's just, it's bad news. Then you empower a department like that with somebody like Kristi Noem. And even if she's the last person in line for the presidency, I mean, she lied about meeting Kim Jong-un and she killed her dog. So just...
Well, I think killing her dog actually got her the job. I mean, I'm not even joking about that. I think the fact that she talked publicly about killing her dog is because Corey Lewandowski said to her, that's an appeal to Trump.
Yes.
Because if you have no mercy for a dog, and Trump hates dogs anyway, but if you have no mercy for a dog, then you'll have no mercy for anybody. Obviously, if you're going to kill your little puppy, like, what's an undocumented migrant?
Yeah.
It's just, the whole thing to me is so bizarre because what we're dealing with ICE right now is, and you know this better than anybody because you've studied this, is, I mean, the way ICE is recruiting with all of these, and I did a whole column on this, but I think it bears talking about all the time. They are literally using, and you know this, Nazi memes and white supremacist memes that the rest of us may not necessarily be aware of. Like when they have a little meme with Uncle Sam facing signs that say which way American man, we are like, what's with that expression? But of course, if you're a anti-Semitic white supremacist, you know that that's a takeoff of which way Western man, which is a big anti-Semitic white supremacist screed that was published in the 70s. And you know, same with their whole, like, I think it was one country, one homeland, one heritage. And I was like, okay, replace heritage with leader. And that's, you know, ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. Like, it's literally the Nazi slogan. And so unless you know that, you're not going to really understand. But the people who they're trying to target to recruit certainly do know that.
Yes. Yeah. They're governing by meme. I've lately been calling it governing by, like, government for and by the trolls, right? Like it's very specific. They're trying to reach a certain audience to say, hey, we see you, we hear you, also come join us. And that is really a tinderbox when you put people like that out on the streets, kind of filled with this like righteous anger against people like Renee Good, against people like Alex Preddy, against the people that they're arresting, the 5-year-olds that they're using as props to lure their parents out of their houses. I mean, I have a hard time looking at those images and understanding how anybody could go home at night and feel okay. And the answer is just what you've described, Julie, that they, this is something that they believe deeply in, I think, in many, many cases. And that's really scary. It's scary when you look at these situations where, again, I just think that we have a tinderbox. We've got people who are angrier and angrier, understandably, at the killing of our fellow Americans and of our community members. And you have people who are empowered by the highest forces in government to do what they're doing. We just have to hope that cooler heads prevail eventually. But it's not a good situation.
Well, let me also ask you this, having worked at DHS, but also just having worked in government, period. And you worked in the executive branch. I never have. So I'll ask you, let's assume that 3 years from now, we have free and fair elections and a Democrat gets elected and we have a Democratic Congress.
Yeah.
Have these people burrowed themselves so much into the government that it's going to be almost impossible to do anything other than try to get them out for the first 4 years?
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to have to do a lot of rebuilding. I think the entire kind of infrastructure of the federal government has been so broken down that what a lot of folks, many of whom had much longer careers in the federal government than I did, civil servants, not political appointees, have been saying is like, yeah, of course it needed reform. It didn't need to happen this way. But now that it has, there is an opportunity to, God, I don't want to say build back better, but to build back better.
I don't use that expression. That is, by the way, speaking of horrible communication.
Yeah.
Like, I can't even get that out of my mouth.
Yeah, no, it's not good, but there it is. It's been seated in my brain. Yeah. At any rate, like there is room to grow. So I think that's the positive outlook on things.
Right.
When I put my post-Soviet hat on and my kind of democracy building hat, I took a class in graduate school that really stayed with me by an old man who had spent time in Romania at the end of the Soviet period. And he always told us these stories about how he always had a cat in his house because the cat would figure out where the bugs were in the wall because it was warm. It was putting out heat, like bugs as in electrical bugs, listening devices. Yep. And this class was on lustration. And a lot of people might not know what that word is, but it's the process of shining light, luster, after a political system rots at its core. And so we went through case studies mostly from Central and Eastern Europe, but also in places like, I think we did Colombia, a couple places in Latin America, where they went through different lustration processes, some, that were headed up by historians, some that were done by judiciary branches, et cetera, and looking at the ways that those affected society. And, a great example is the Stasi archives in Germany. Right. Anybody can go and look up if their relatives were spied on by the Stasi. That's still open to the public today. Obviously, there were the Nuremberg trials as well. Other countries had different approaches, but one thing that stuck with me was that in a country like Poland, for instance, which did not do a full lustration, as the decades went further, there were a lot of accusations and suspicions thrown around by people in politics, like, oh, you were a collaborator with the Soviets, you did X, Y, and Z. And nobody really knows because nothing ever happened. And so I keep coming back to, I don't know how we get past this period unless we have some sort of truth and reconciliation.
Said that for a really long time.
Process, but at the same time, it's gonna, I really think it's gonna take something enormous for a third of Americans to accept that right now. Like, and you have to wonder, we had our elections get undermined by a foreign power in 2016. We had COVID, we had an insurrection, and it's just gotten worse and worse. So it's going to take something, I think, really catastrophic for that to happen. I hate to be like,
listen, it's funny that you say this. Funny is not the word. It's interesting that you say this because I was talking to John Harwood yesterday. I did a show with him and he and I were saying the exact same thing, almost verbatim. And I was saying that I had worked in the Senate on 9/11. And I had been evacuated with the Senate for reasons that are just I'm not even sure why, but the senator I worked with said that I should stay with him. And so everybody else got to go home. And I ended up being one of the very few staffers who ended up spending the day at the Capitol Police station with the Senate, because that's where they took all the senators. And, there was no press. There were virtually no staff. And so you kind of got to see these people in their state of nature.
Mm.
And, there are some instances of people behaving very poorly, but for the most part, everybody got together. There was no partisanship. There was no finger pointing. There was no like, holy shit, what did the president do? Or what did the Republicans do? Or what did the Democrats not do? And Bill Clinton didn't get him when he should have. And George Bush ignored intelligence. Like, there was none of that.
Yeah.
And I think partially there was none of that because nobody had these back then. So nobody was able to stare into the phone and do a live, video saying, here I am, at the Capitol Police station. And so it was like a day of unity that I don't know if it was ever destined to last. And, a lot of us say that Bush going into Iraq certainly shattered that unity, but the unity was there for a while after 9/11 because it was such a monumental crisis.
Mm.
And anybody who lived through it understood what was going on. I mean, you live in DC, so you know this. Like, I remember the streets were just empty. I happened to be the senator I was working with, and we were driving back to his house because there was no other way for me to get anywhere other than to go to his house and then get a ride back to my house from his house. And we were driving down Constitution Avenue past the South Lawn, and you just saw helicopter after helicopter landing in the dark while the Pentagon was kind of burning. And it was just a crazy, surreal moment. Mm. And at that point, I think everybody felt very much like we're all in this together.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine if that were to happen today, that people would not be pointing fingers at each other within 30 seconds of it happening. And crazy conspiracy theories. And this was all, all the stuff that used to be really on the fringes now has become very kind of accepted, including January 6th. So I don't know what it would take for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, not to mention this country's really bad at owning up to its bad history, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
Other countries, I don't know, I know there are people in the chat here who are from all over the world, but like the British have no problem talking about their colonial past and saying, you know what, maybe we shouldn't have gone as far as we did. The French certainly have, except for the now extreme part of France, which is about to be ascendant. But, normally they talk about it, and understandably so. We don't even talk about slavery without not really talking about slavery. So what's it going to take? I don't even know. And plus, even if it took something, are we really ever going to admit to ourselves that maybe we're not the shining city on the hill that we always want to portray ourselves as, to take ownership of what's been happening for the last year, if not the last decade?
I mean, I think we have to. And that was something I really struggled with when I worked in democracy support at the beginning of my career, because we did a lot of great work, supporting civil society activists, election monitors, et cetera. But it always really ground my gears that we would send in campaign consultants from the United States to lecture a bunch of Russians or Belarusians or Ukrainians about how to do campaigns. Like, the realities on the ground for those folks were just so different. I was like, maybe we don't always know best. Like, just because you won a campaign for X senator or this president doesn't mean that your techniques are really going to hold water in somewhere like Moscow. But also, I had a similar moment to what you just described about like, what's it going to take in 2024 before the election. I was giving a lecture at a military college in Vermont. And at the same conference as me was a 3-star general who gave a speech that was all about disinformation and the ways that our adversaries use it. And she got basically that same question, what's it going to take? And she didn't have an answer. And if a 3-star general doesn't have an answer to, how much deeper, farther can we go, then I'm not sure I do either. But like, when I look at Minneapolis, and the horrible stuff that's going on there, and especially the witnesses to Alex Pretty's murder have come forward over the past couple of days and done these heart-wrenching interviews about what they saw.
Did you see that interview with Anderson Cooper?
Yes, it made me cry.
Stella Carlson.
Yeah.
First of all, this woman, my hat is off to her. I've never seen a more self-possessed, righteously angry, just wonderful woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, it made me cry too. Amazing. Anybody who hasn't seen it, please watch it if you can track it down. It is kind of riveting television, and I don't say that about cable news too often.
Yeah, she was incredible. And you know, you look at that. Was it the same day? I think that later that day, the other video from last week or whatever of Preddy smashing a taillight in came out, and you have to, okay, like they knew that video existed. They waited to release it, right? Something like that. They're doing it on purpose to try to kind of sully the memory of this man. And I actually had an argument with one of my loved ones last night about that, because they said, you know, well, that's not good for him. I'm like, well, he's dead, first of all.
Well, okay.
And second of all, like, you know, I think the argument that they were saying was that it was silly for him to have gotten in the way of the law enforcement. I was like, let's talk about resistance throughout history, right? I recently read a book about the suffragettes in England. Mm-hmm. Those ladies did some crazy shit. Like,
well, 100%.
And they would not have gotten the vote and then paved the way for us to get the vote in the States if they had not done that.
Let's back up. I mean, I've said this before, like the same people when I worked at Fox who would always wave their little pocket constitutions and talk about the founding fathers and originalism. Yes. What about the Boston Tea Party?
Absolutely.
What about the Boston Massacre? What about the American Revolution, which was literally a revolt against the government? Like, what are you talking about here? Was it legal to dump tea in Boston Harbor? Was it legal to, gather on Boston Common? You were told not to? No, of course not.
Yeah.
But they did it anyway because they believed in something. And so the same people who completely and constantly evoke the founding of this country as something sacred that you could never even remotely, question. These people were like, there's Jesus and there's the founding fathers on the same level in their mind. Well, those guys were criminals. I mean, they were, because they rebelled against the British, who were in charge of this country at the time. Yeah. And so like Alex Preddy smashing a taillight.
Well, okay. and even if he did, he doesn't deserve to be murdered for that. I mean, like, it's just insane. And there was a great thread. I want to say it was Walker Bragman who did it on Blue Sky, where he was like, here's all the instances that I could find of Trump supporters carrying guns at protests. And they're not little handguns. They're like semi-automatic weapons that they're brandishing at protest after protest after protest. I mean,
Kyle Rittenhouse.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
That crazy couple, I forgot their name, the McCluskeys, I think, who remember that protest that literally then got a speaking slot at the first night of the 2020 Republican convention and were hailed as like martyrs for their Second Amendment rights. And same thing. I mean, Trump was out there saying like, yeah, you shouldn't be able to carry guns. You shouldn't have guns. Where's the ghost of Charlton Heston? Like, where are all of these people who are clutching their pearls about how Democrats want to get rid of the Second Amendment? This guy has attacked the First Amendment. You're devoting your entire life to that. In fact, the show began with your talking about your attack on the First Amendment. They're attacking the First Amendment. He's attacking the Second Amendment. He's attacking the Fourth Amendment. He's attacking the 10th Amendment, which they always states' rights, like everything.
Pete Hegseth doesn't want women to vote anymore. 19th out the window.
Amendment? Yeah, where's prohibition? It's probably coming back. But it's
it's a complete undermining of our civil and political rights and human rights. And I don't think people realize that when they take it away for one group of people, it makes it easier for them to take it away from another. And so one of the things that we highlighted on TrumpCensorship.com, which I guess is a little farther afield than censorship, but we included it anyway, was there was this moment where I think after the Charlie Kirk shooting, where a bunch of conservatives were saying, transgender people should not be allowed to own guns. Again, it's just like, either you're allowed to have a gun legally, or you're not. And
Yeah.
if you disallow one group of people from having it, unless they are convicted felons, violent felons, then like there's no other group that should be prohibited from that, or it is an undue restriction on their civil and political rights. And the same is true for speech, etc. And I think a lot of folks, again, it would behoove our fellow Americans to do more reading about what's going on in other parts of the world, because when you start to take those rights away from one group, that's when they start to get removed from everyone else. And we should want everybody to have those same opportunities and same rights. Same goes for, frankly, the foreigners who are being attacked for using their speech rights. A lot of Americans, a shocking amount of Americans that I've encountered, including some members of Congress, do not believe that foreigners like Rumesia Ozturk and Mahmoud Khalil should be able to use their free speech rights as students in this country. Well, there's Supreme Court cases that have upheld that right. And
except the court is now apparently allowing him to be deported to Algeria. And
Yeah.
listen, you don't have to agree with him on what happened in Colombia. You don't have to agree with him on his views on the Palestinian issue. You don't have to agree with him on anything.
Yeah.
But what you should agree on is the fact that he has the right to say what he has to say. I mean, he is a green card holder and he can say whatever he wants. What happened to her was even worse. So maybe not even worse, but it was pretty brutal as well. But it's this continual attack on everything that they claimed to have been against, they are now for.
Yeah.
Whether it's guns, or it's free speech, or it's states' rights, or you name it, whatever freedom they felt the need to enunciate and enumerate no longer exists.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing that this all happened in a year. I mean, you're documenting this in the last year, but we have 3 more years to go, friends. Like, it's not, we're just in the first quarter. We just got done. I mean, there's much more to go here. And it's just incredible to me as to how much worse this is going to get. And it will get worse. I don't see a bottom here. I don't know if you do.
No, I mean, when you look at the data, right, it's across agencies, it's around the country, and frankly, around the world. They've taken some censorship actions against foreign countries, foreign individuals, which we've kind of mapped out as well. And again, you just look at the sheer numbers, and it's several incidents per week that would have caused a massive conflagration had they happened in the Biden administration. Everything that Biden was accused of, Trump is doing more and worse.
Yeah.
And that's again one of the reasons that we're spending so much time documenting it and putting in this dashboard to make it easy for people to digest, because we're in a perma crisis. As you said, we're living on a razor's edge. There's so much news every day, it's impossible to keep up. I don't want everybody to have to obsess about this like I do, like my team does. But that's, you can come to our website once a week, Censorship.com, and you can say what happened this week. You can click around and see if your state has been affected, or an agency that maybe you care about, something like that. And you can look by category as well, and look at if you care about freedom of the press or freedom of religion or language policing, any of these things, you can kind of sort through. So we hope it's a useful tool. And we also do a written format of that every week in our newsletter, americansunlight.substack.com. Once a week, we send out kind of the last week in censorship newsletter, which is not always an optimistic read, but
well, you know what? But it's an important read. So tell me again where people can find you. They can certainly find you at TrumpCensorship.com.
Yes, TrumpCensorship.com, AmericanSunlight.substack.com, and my personal Substack is thewayfinder.net. And that is a place where I'm giving you a way to navigate our complicated and polluted information environment once a week, tips in your inbox, interviews with people who are doing good stuff in this space. And hopefully, some bright spots as well, although there are very few these days. One bright spot I will point out is that California, to the Californians in the chat, hello, thank you for your great state. California at the first of the year now has an opt-out of data collection for like private personal information. So all those data brokers that sell your address and what seat you like to sit in on airplanes and all that stuff, the state, rather than needing to pay a company like Delete Me or Canary or others to do that for you. The state's doing it for them, which I think is pretty cool.
That's great. Nobody knows about this. Did you write about this or talk
I'm
about
going to write about it. I'm trying to
Good.
get an interview with somebody in Newsom's administration about it. But yeah,
Fabulous.
it's a good thing.
That's a really good information to know. And the good news about California is, as California goes, a lot of other states follow.
Yes, particularly with tech legislation.
Yeah. So that's
we might be joining Europe soon in privacy legislation. We can only hope.
That would be amazing, because I think a lot of us would like to disappear from the webs.
Understandably.
Try as we might. All right, Nina, it is so good to see you. I know you said you have something coming up that's really exciting that you're going to announce.
I do. I can't share it yet, but keep an eye out.
Got it. You better come back here and share it when you're ready to do it, because I love having you on the show all the time. And thank you so much. Thank you for, first of all, I think on behalf, and I really mean this, on behalf of like all of us in this country, thank you for what you tried so desperately to do when you were in the Biden administration. I'll say it because you might not want to. That administration did not have your back the way they should have. And that's a shame, and that's a stain on them. But hopefully better days are coming, and one day you will be able to do for this country what you tried to do for this country a few years ago. So
yeah, well, I'm still working on it. Thank you for having me on, and for letting me talk to your audience. And yeah, looking forward to being on again soon.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. See ya. Bye.